always your friend. If anybody was here a couple years ago, I kind of did the thing where I passed out a handout with all these chords that I play that don't have thirds in them. And I think somebody posted it on the internet, because I get emails every now and then from people asking me about those chords, and maybe I notated them wrong or something like that. So briefly, that's for me. I'm not here. Briefly, what I'm saying about bar chords are not always your friend are that most of us generally in our tones, we have a fair amount of harmonic complexity. We like a little distortion. So that when you hit all 6 strings, and especially if they have a big major third in them, and with that distortion, even a guitar that's well intonated and is in really good tune you can get all sorts of wavery stuff that makes your fillings loose in your teeth and everything else. So I think you'll find that better players, guys that, professional players, studio players, live players, they adopt an approach to playing rhythm that really doesn't, you rarely see, how do I put this? Someone who plays a lot of gigs playing that kind of an A chord. There's just too much information right there going into the amp, and the amp's like, whoa, So, briefly, my approach, and I think a lot of people's approach, is eliminate some of those strings. You don't need all 6 strings to make it sound big. I mean, if you just eliminate, and also by eliminating some of the major thirds, and so when, classic rock power chords, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Pete Townsend, quite often don't have thirds in them. So, Pete Townsend's A chord is going to be much more like this. That sounds a whole lot different than. To me, right there, that takes your playing to a whole nother plane. If you can start thinking about, getting rid of those 6-note chords. The exception I would make would be, the open E. But even on that, I rarely play. I always go. And a couple of other ways, if you insist on having that major third in there, one thing I found to be real musical, and I found that it seems to intonate a lot better, is sort of my hybrid, I call it my hybrid Keith Richards approach, where you sort of pretend that you're in an open tuning, but you're not. And the way you do that is if you play the root on the 6th string with your pinky finger. So in the key of C, there's a C. You use this finger to mute the 5th string, and then you have all these notes, and you can just sus. So I'm playing just 4 notes on those chords right there, but it sounds big and it sounds good, it's in tune. So your pinky finger on the 6th string, like that, you kind of get that open tuning sound. If you really want to have a major third and do that sus thing, is a great way to move away from typical bar chords. The other thing, the easiest thing, or the most common thing I do, is I use my thumb to play the root. So if you want to keep the C, like let's just say a C7, I'm going to use my thumb here on the C, and the thumb will mute the A string. The first finger will play the flat 7, which is a B flat, and then my second finger will play the third of the chord, which is an E. which is F. And then come back up to more of the P-tones, and then come back. Chords were just 3 notes, but you get a good amplifier and a good guitar. So again, the 3 notes chords that I'm talking about are like they're real simple. But you can move the notes around within those chords. So I'm playing a C chord, C, G, and C. I'm just playing 1, 5, 1. Same thing up here, up an octave. If you don't want to use your pick and fingers, you can do it with just a pick. But I think you'll find that if you get away from some of the standard, bar chords that we all learn initially, and think about some of these other voicings, which you can spend a lot of time working on. If you just start thinking in that direction, you'll find that your rhythm playing gets really solid. And it also has really become an element of me when I write songs, and when like with my band, when we stretch out, we try to leave the tonality a little ambiguous, whether it's not strictly major or strictly minor. And then you can think of that too, do y'all know what I'm talking about when like a minor third and a major third? Do most of you guys know what I'm talking about? A major chord has the major third, an A major. A minor third, you flat that third. Anyway, then you've got the Jimi Hendrix chord, everybody calls it, which is a 7+9 that has the major third and the minor third. So in A, most people play it in this voicing. You've got both. So when you have both of those, or you have no thirds, you can play a major, the tonality is left pretty wide open. And for soloing, I find it real freeing that way, because it's not, I'm not strictly nailed down to the major scale, the Mixolydian mode of the major scale, or the Dorian mode of the major scale, and so, which brings me to my whole I'm trying to cram this in 5 minutes, but scales to me when I first started were super complicated. I mean, I really had a hard time wrapping my head around all these modes, and oh God, it was just more than I could. Surely there's got to be an easier way. And so, well, first of all, there's not necessarily an easier way. You still have to put in the time. But one thing that I've sort of come to realize about my style is that when you look at the shapes of the scales that I play when I solo, I'm essentially only playing 2 scales. Technically, it's more than that, but really, if you look at the shapes that I'm playing, I'm thinking in terms of the different forms of the major scale and then the pentatonic scale, with a liberal dose of chromatics dropped in, like salt and pepper, whenever it seems appropriate. But briefly, what I mean by that is, I had a teacher who got me going, taught me how to read music a little bit, got me into some theory, taught me a few jazz songs, and how to read charts and that kind of thing. But he had me doing these major scale studies where I learned the major scale in 4 different positions, up and down the fingerboard. Two that started on the 6th string and 2 that started on the 5th string. And they kind of cover, like just briefly, I'll show you what they are. In G, the G major, starting on your second finger. That was the one of them. And then starting with your first finger. And then starting on the fifth, on the G up here, on the fifth, starting with your fourth finger. That was one way to do it, and then starting with your second finger. So, I practiced those, and practiced them, and practiced them, and all of a sudden, I get this thing called muscle memory, and it becomes kind of second nature all of a sudden. And then, with just a little bit of investigation into these things called modes, what I learned is that we start out playing in E and A a lot and stuff. So when I'm playing in A, okay, that's an A7 chord. Now instead of thinking A mixolydian, I can think of A mixolydian if I want, but all it is this exact same fingering for a D major scale. It just starts on A. And if you just do a little bit of theory, you'll figure all that out. It's not that complicated, but it's that muscle memory from the D major scale that I practiced over and over and over again. But it ends on A. And so I began to put this puzzle together. And like for instance, okay, here's a D major chord. If I play this lick on the D major scale, now if I play an A chord, all these things are the same. It's the same exact fingering. So it's really helped me to get the fingerings of the major scale together, and then all the modes just started opening up in my brain. So that, combined with pentatonic scales, and if you know a minor pentatonic scale, you know the major pentatonic scale. An A major pentatonic scale is exactly the same as an F sharp minor pentatonic scale. It's a 5-note scale. It's the Dickie Betts Ramblin' Man solo. That's the Dickie Betts scale. But yeah, it's one little extra note there. But anyway, then the blues scale is just the pentatonics, the minor pentatonic scale with an extra note added in. So again, that A major or the F sharp minor pentatonic, you add this flat 5 in. The blue note. It's all F sharp minor pentatonic or F sharp minor blues scale. And if I'm playing stick to a straight major scale, I know that F sharp minor 7, what I'm playing is just an E major scale that starts on F sharp minor, so I can play these E major fingerings that I already know over that. And so that has helped me to sort of think, strip it down to, if I learn all the fingerings for the major scale, and then I get fluent in the pentatonic scale, and then I start throwing in chromatics, and by that I mean passing tones, for instance, in the key of A. I'm just playing an A mixolydian or D major, starting on A, and then throwing in the in-between notes that are in between, they're the half stick in between the whole steps. So you play that note in between. hopefully that, I mean, you know, the thing that I would recommend, if you want to take your playing to the next level, 20 minutes a day. If you do this for 20 minutes a day, I guarantee you in a month you will notice a huge shift. And that is, if you take, whether it's you subtract it from your internet time, or if you don't spend a lot of time on the internet, still find 20 minutes a day. Spend 15 minutes going over the 4 different fingerings for the major scale. 15 minutes. Slowly play it evenly. Find those 4 different positions. You can get them on. You can go online. I'm sure any book will show you 4 different ways to play a major scale. Take a different key every day, and do that for a month. And combined with spending 5 minutes going over the notes on the fretboard to make sure you know exactly where every note is, so that you're fluent like a typist. You can't type if you don't know where the letters are. And so if you do those 2 things, 20 minutes a day, I guarantee you in a month you will notice a huge shift. And Paul's standing over here like